Du sagst mir, okay. So, willkommen zu unserer Wir lesen gemeinsam wieder. Das erste in diese neue Saison. I am going to be reading from a book by short stories by Esther Kreitmann. And what is important about her is that she is the eldest sister of both the Singer brothers. So she was actually born in March 1891 and died in 1954. And she did not have a very good relationship with her family, and especially her brothers. But Isaac Bashevis Singer has also said that she was very instrumental in also forming his writing styles. And interesting, when you read her work, you also see that. She was, by all accounts, a not very pleasant woman. But part of that was also because she was really a product of her time. She was sold off in a marriage that was very loveless, and actually passed away in London. Now, her book of short stories is divided into two parts. There are the stories that are called the Shtetl stories, and there are the stories that are called the London stories. And she wrote these in English, but also sometimes in Yiddish. So I'm going to be reading Blitz, which is the title of the short story book. And it is one of the London stories. A drawn-out wail, heavy and melancholy. The announcement coming from the siren sounded like a song of lamentation. The people living round the docks did not even have time enough to be frightened. It came down suddenly. It seemed to fall straight from heaven, the Eastenders would say afterwards. The heavens had expanded over the city, as wide and clear as if they were hovering somewhere over the Orient, and not over wet, misty London, bathing eternally in soot, smoke, and darkness. Its inhabitants were pale and withdrawn, haunted by the dampness that pervaded everything. It was September, and the sun poured its cruel heat over the black city, covering the grime that had been gathering for years in the little alleyways, on the identical flat-faced houses. The rays of the sun were fierce and penetrating. They crept into the wrinkles of poor people's skin, revealing the dark pores, the tiniest hairs on a chin or mole, and the blue lips of old and middle-aged Gentile women who had just come outside with their baskets and purses, their wages fresh in their hands, ready to go and buy meat for the Sunday roast. It was the afternoon of the Jewish Sabbath. The Gentile women and those Jewish women who worked on Saturdays were all in a hurry. They were on their hands and knees, busy scrubbing lime into the doorsteps of the narrow house terraces. Copper door knockers were being polished until they shone as brilliantly as the sun whose rays were caught in them. Canaries could be seen hopping around in their cages in low, broad windows with checkered wooden panes. These had lost their wooden appearance a long time ago, and now looked more like old, corroded tin, peeling and crumbling everywhere. Satisfied, filled with the warmth of the bright sun, the birds were singing cheerfully, oblivious of the war taking over the world. Cats were nearby, looking with wondering eyes at the frenzied cleaning, as if they were about to ask the women what the point of washing the doorsteps and polishing knockers at a time of war was, when there were so many more urgent things to be done. The Jewish women who had already rested were sitting outside the small houses. They discussed the wars, the sons who were in the army, and those who would be called up soon to help protect England and to save the world from that crazy brute. Mothers sighed and assured each other that with God's help, he would die a violent death, that Hitler. The men were in shirt sleeves because of the heat. They sat rocking on low kitchen stools while telling their neighbors it was a sin to talk like that. The more one swears at him, the stronger he gets, adding curses of their own. May he die in torment. So what? Heaven and earth have sworn that the world will not come to an end, the old Bible scholar Abrams threw in as he closed his copy of the Ein Yaakov. And the tall Simon, a Jewish boxer, made a fist. We'll show him, he said, and squeezed his hand so tightly that you saw his 5 white knuckles, which looked as if they could kill a man with one blow. Of course not. The world will not come to an end. Jews comforted themselves, and the sun melted the creases on their Sabbath faces into a smile. Its light crept into the narrowest of houses, through the half-open doors of homes that looked like black crates. A wonderful world, if only we were allowed to enjoy it, the mothers said as they tried to wipe away stubborn tears, which reappeared as soon as they had dried up. Little girls raced past them on the cobblestones, small whirlwinds of silk and satin, jumping over ropes, flaunting flowing locks of hair. Their mothers had tried to outdo each other, skillfully creating snake-like curls. The sun made its way into every little corner. It slid down behind a clothes hanger and onto the peeling furniture in a house basking in its Sabbath mood. In a shop, the light crept over a few green apples, a shriveled bunch of parsley, a couple of wrinkled tomatoes, and a head of garlic. Carefully, it threaded the blue lines of a silk tallis, weaving itself into the prayer shawl's string of tassels. It warmed and lit up the gold leaf on all kinds of holy books and women's prayer books in a neighborhood bookstore. Then it disappeared discreetly into the background, so as not to trouble the gramophone records. Brivele der Mamen and Roshkenies mit Mandeln and the Haggadahs for Pesach, which had all been cleared away out of respect for the approaching high holidays, and which were now lying peacefully under a layer of dust. Boys and girls were getting ready to go out and leave the hot, narrow streets, which smelt of rotting fruit, scorched trousers, from being in the tailor's workshop, horse dung, and stables. They had their minds set on a part of London where the streets were not all tangled up and cut off by the commercial road. They were longing for a part of the city where the streets were broad, beautiful, and spacious. Even in these days, the windows were covered with brown strips of paper all the time, and gray sandbags were piled up around magnificent buildings, hiding half of the display windows. Youngsters looked as neat as a new pin. Girls combed their hair until it was shining and smooth, their fingernails polished to perfection. The boys seemed to have been bathing themselves in brilliantine. The creases in their trousers were as sharp as knives. None of them seemed troubled by the fact that soon they would be leaving for the front. Quite the reverse. They would rather go today than tomorrow. Oi, how we will hit them! The young men could hardly wait to give the enemy a hell of a time. Their Jewish hearts were burning with the desire to beat the Nazis. But in the meantime, until they would be called up, life was there to be lived. Whee! Wails the siren, imploring the youngsters not to go. It is dangerous, and even before its sound has died away, one can hear explosions, together with the roar of hundreds of airplanes. They are like birds of prey, filling the sky with their flashing steel. Bang, boom, and the little black houses are blown in all directions, like shards of coal under a miner's hammer. Suffocating black smoke is carried this way from the burning buildings in the docks. Long rows of houses are on fire in no time at all. Flames dance in a pandemonium behind every window. They stick out fiery, licking tongues and look like devils, strangely beautiful even. The flames come in many different shades of green, red, yellow, orange, a feast of color as if to make fun of humanity and signify its ruin. The food supplies for the oncoming winter are all on fire. The food has been brought over by the brave seamen. They risk their lives to care for this country, which has not provided for itself with ripe cornfields nor with its own bread, like other nations have done. The barges lie burning on the Thames, like low mountains on fire. It seems as if the river itself will soon be on fire. The Thames and the sky, both seas of blood. In the alleyways, men and women flee in all directions, dragging with them their own and other people's children. Some of the children are crying, others are struck dumb with terror. They try to save themselves, but they cannot find a way out. Death is lurking everywhere. Glass is falling, it is raining bricks, the roofs come crashing down, whole houses are collapsing, all at once. Human beings are buried alive, men, women, and children. Their cries and the groans of the wounded are drowned out by the shouts of people standing outside their front doors who do not want to leave their ruined homes. Recklessly, they grapple with the fire, wanting to remove the debris with their bare hands, the molten lumps of earth and the bent iron beams glowing from the heat. In an attempt to drag out the people who are still alive, they only succeed in burying themselves. The lamenting around the ruins becomes increasingly bitter when people find the bodies of their own mothers and fathers, their own children and neighbors. "Where is God?" asks the wife of old Abrams as she looks up at the brightly lit sky. But a bomb blast hurls her away. She lies there motionless, clutching her wig tightly in one hand. She does not ask any more questions. Tall Simon has been working tirelessly. He has pulled body after body out from under the rubble, handing them over to the emergency workers. Crippled bodies, covered in blood, some of them dead. Now, all of a sudden, he loses his mind. The relentless neighing of the horses in their locked-up stables in the docklands is too much for him. He abandons everything and walks away, treading on the living and the dead. Then he throws himself into the fire and rips open the stable doors. A numb panic surrounds the horses as they leap out. They gallop wildly off into the narrow streets, trampling everything underfoot. Within seconds, they are like running torches, fleeing the suffocating smoke. They collapse in mid-flight, stretching out as if in silent protest, with their hooves raised to the blazing sky. Night was falling. The sun was going down, inflamed and glowing red. The heavens were left to bleed. 2 fires lit up the sky, one in the east and one in the west. The Nazi airplanes were still there. Just like the spiders who once brought fire to the temple, they flew in more and more bombs to drop on the Jewish alleyways where nothing was left to destroy. So, that was Blitz.
Danke, Giuliana. Dann lese ich etwas auf Deutsch vor. Es ist aus dem Buch von Isaac Bashevis Singer, Eine Kindheit in Warschau. Und das war auch jenes Buch, das mich mit Isaac Bashevis Singer ein bisschen ausgesöhnt hat. Denn ich habe mit ihm eigentlich nichts anfangen können. Meine Oma hat ihn unheimlich gern gehabt und daher habe ich ihn auch gelesen, aber ich habe nichts damit anfangen können. Und dann habe ich dieses Buch irgendwie in die Hände bekommen und habe es gelesen und muss sagen, das war dann ein bisschen anders. Also dann habe ich einen anderen Blick auf ihn bekommen. Und ich möchte gleich mit seiner Vorstellung beginnen, wer ich bin. Ich wurde am 14. Juli 1904 in Radzimin, einer kleinen Stadt in der Nähe der polnischen Hauptstadt Warschau, geboren. Mein Vater, Pinchas Menachem Singer, war Rabbi, ein tiefgläubiger Mann. Er hatte einen roten Bart, lange schwarze Schläfenlocken und blaue Augen. Meine Mutter, Batsheva, war die Tochter des Rabbis von Bilgoraj, einem Ort in der Nähe von Lublin. Sie hatte rotes Haar, das sie kurz schnitt und mit einer Perücke bedeckte, wie es unter frommen, verheirateten jüdischen Frauen üblich ist. Anfang des Jahres 1908, als ich 3 Jahre alt war, zogen meine Eltern von Radzimin nach Warschau. Dort wurde mein Vater Rabbi in einer sehr ärmlichen Straße in der Krochmalna. Das Mietshaus, in dem ich aufwuchs, würde heute in Amerika zu den Slums gehören. Aber damals empfanden wir das als nicht weiter schlimm. Abends wurde unsere Wohnung von einer Petroleumlampe erleuchtet. Badezimmer oder fließendes heißes Wasser kannten wir nicht. Das Klosetthäuschen war draußen im Hof. Die Leute, die in der Krochmalna wohnten, waren meistens arme Ladenbesitzer oder Arbeiter. Aber es lebten dort auch viele Gelehrte, ebenso wie Tagediebe, Verbrecher, Leute aus der Unterwelt. Als ich etwa 4 Jahre alt war, kam ich in den Cheder. Jeden Morgen holte mich ein Lehrer ab und brachte mich hin. Ich hatte ein Gebetbuch bei mir, später eine Bibel oder einen Band des Talmud. Das waren meine Schulbücher. Im Cheder hatten wir hauptsächlich Religionsunterricht. Wir lernten beten und den Pentateuch lesen, lernten aber auch Jiddisch zu schreiben. Mein erster Lehrer war ein alter Mann mit weißem Bart. Ich hatte einen jüngeren Bruder, Moische, der noch ein Säugling war, als wir nach Warschau zogen. Eine Schwester, Hinde Esther, die 13 Jahre älter war als ich, und einen Bruder, Israel Joshua, 11 Jahre älter. Außer Moische wurden wir später alle Schriftsteller. Der Roman meines Bruders, Die Brüder Ashkenazi, wurde in mehreren Sprachen übersetzt, auch ins Englische. Er schrieb in Jiddisch, so wie ich. Unsere Wohnung war ein Ort der Gelehrsamkeit. Mein Vater studierte den ganzen Tag den Talmud. So oft meine Mutter eine freie Minute hatte, schaute sie in ein frommes Buch. Während andere Kinder Spielzeug besaßen, spielte ich mit den Büchern meines Vaters. Ich begann schon zu schreiben, als ich das Alphabet noch gar nicht kannte. Ich tauchte einfach eine Feder in Tinte und kritzelte etwas hin. Ich malte auch gern. Pferde, Häuser, Hunde. Das Schabbat war eine Qual für mich, weil es verboten ist, an diesem Tag zu schreiben. In Warschau richtete mein Vater in unserer Wohnung einen rabbinischen Gerichtshof ein. Die Leute aus der Krochmalna kamen, um ihn um Rat zu fragen oder um ihn einen Streit nach dem Gesetz der Torah schlichten zu lassen. Mein Vater war eigentlich Rabbi, Richter und geistliches Oberhaupt in einer Person. Es kamen noch Leute, die nur ihr Herz ausschütten wollten. In unserer Wohnung schloss mein Vater Ehen, löste aber auch von Zeit zu Zeit eine Ehe. Unter den Juden damals war ein Rabbi, ein Mann mit vielen Aufgaben und wenig Einkünften. Ich war von Natur aus neugierig. Gern beobachtete ich die Erwachsenen, wie sie sich verhielten. Ich folgte aufmerksam in Gesprächen. Manchmal verstand ich, was sie sagten, und manchmal nicht. Schon früh begann ich, mir alle möglichen Fragen zu stellen. Was würde geschehen, wenn ein Vogel immer weiter in die gleiche Richtung flöge? Was würde geschehen, wenn man eine Leiter von der Erde zum Himmel baute? Was war, bevor die Welt erschaffen wurde? Hatte Zeit einen Anfang? Aber wie könnte Zeit einen Anfang haben? Hat Raum ein Ende? Aber wie könnte leerer Raum ein Ende haben? Unsere Wohnung in der Krochmalna 10 hatte einen Balkon, auf dem ich oft viele Stunden stand und nachdachte. Im Sommer versammelten sich dort alle möglichen Insekten. Fliegen, Bienen, Schmetterlinge. Diese Wesen weckten in mir eine große Neugier. Was aßen sie? Wo schliefen sie? Wer hatte ihnen Leben gegeben? Nachts erschienen der Mond und die Sterne am Himmel. Mir wurde erzählt, dass einige Sterne größer als die Erde seien. Wenn sie aber so groß sind, wie konnten sie dann in den schmalen Streifen Himmel über den Dächern der Krochmalna passen? Ich stellte meinen Eltern oft Fragen, die auch sie nicht beantworten konnten. Mein Vater sagte dann immer, es sei nicht gut, sich solche Fragen zu gestatten. Meine Mutter aber sagte, ich würde die Antworten finden, wenn ich erwachsen sei. Doch ich stellte bald fest, dass auch Erwachsene nicht alles wissen. Menschen starben in unserer Straße und diese erste erschütternde Erfahrung des Todes weckte Furcht und Verwunderung in mir. Meine Mutter tröstete mich. Sie sagte, dass die guten Menschen nach dem Tode ins Paradies kämen. Aber was tun die Seelen im Paradies, wollte ich wissen. Wie sieht es dort aus? Ich dachte lange nach über die Schrecken der Hölle, wo die Seelen der Sünder bestraft werden. Ich war noch jung, als ich zum ersten Mal erfuhr, was Menschen zu leiden haben. Polen, zerrissen und aufgeteilt zwischen Russland, Deutschland und Österreich, hatte seine Unabhängigkeit vor etwa 100 Jahren verloren. Wir Juden aber hatten unser Land Israel vor fast 2000 Jahren verloren. Mein Vater versicherte mir zwar, dass der Messias kommen werde und wir alle in das Land Israel zurückkehren würden, wenn die Juden einen frommen Lebenswandel führten. Aber 2000 Jahre zu warten war eine zu lange Zeit. Und außerdem, woher konnte man wissen, dass alle Juden Gottes Gesetz achten würden? Es gab Diebe in unserer Straße, alle möglichen Schwindler. Sie und ihresgleichen könnten das Kommen des Messias für immer und ewig hinausschieben. In meinem Geburtsjahr starb der große Führer des jüdischen Volkes, Dr. Theodor Herzl. Er predigte den Juden, nicht auf das Kommen des Messias zu warten, sondern selbst mit dem Aufbau Palästinas zu beginnen. Aber wie konnten wir das, wenn das Land den Türken gehörte? In unserer Straße gab es Revolutionäre, die den Zaren von Russland stürzen wollten. Sie träumten von der Gründung eines Staates, in dem alle arbeiteten und in dem es weder Reiche noch Arme gab. Aber wie konnte jemand den Zaren entthronen, wenn er doch so viele Soldaten mit Säbeln und Gewehren hatte? Und wie konnte es keine Reichen und Armen mehr geben? Es würde immer Leute geben, die in der Kochmalna wohnen mussten und andere, die in der Masalkowska wohnten, einer Prachtstraße mit Bäumen und Luxusgeschäften. Die einen lebten in großen Städten, die anderen in abgelegenen Dörfern. Zu Hause wurden diese Fragen von meiner Familie und Besuchern oft diskutiert. Ich merkte mir jedes Wort. Meine Eltern, mein älterer Bruder und meine Schwester erzählten alle gerne Geschichten. Mein Vater erzählte oft von den Wundertaten einzelner Rabbis, aber auch von Geistern, Teufeln und Kobolden. Auf diese Weise wollte er uns festigen im Glauben an Gott und an die guten und bösen Mächte, die die Welt regierten. Meine Mutter erzählte uns Geschichten aus Bilgorei, wo ihr Vater Rabbi war und die Gemeinde mit fester Hand lenkte. Mein Bruder Joshua hatte sich dem weltlichen Leben zugewendet und fing an, Bücher zu lesen, die nicht religiös waren. Er erzählte mir von Deutschland, Frankreich und Amerika, von fremden Nationen und Rassen, von sonderbaren Anschauungen und Gebräuchen. Er beschrieb alles so lebendig, als ob er das selbst kennengelernt hätte. Meine Schwester erzählte romantische Geschichten von Grafen, die sich in Dienstmädchen verliebten. Ich hing meinen eigenen Fantasien nach. Als ich noch sehr klein war, begann ich schon alle möglichen Geschichten zu erfinden und den Jungen im Cheder zu erzählen. Einmal erzählte ich ihnen, dass mein Vater ein König sei. Das tat ich so genau, dass sie mir glaubten. Wie sie mir glauben konnten, ist es mir heute noch ein Rätsel. Ich war ganz gewiss nicht wie ein Prinz gekleidet. 1914 brach der Erste Weltkrieg aus. 1915, ich war gerade 11 Jahre, besetzten die Deutschen Warschau. 1917 hörte ich die unglaubliche Nachricht, dass Zar Nikolaus II. Gestürzt worden sei. Die Soldaten mit den Säbeln und Gewehren hatten ihn nicht beschützt, sondern die Revolutionäre sogar unterstützt. Wenn das geschehen konnte, war es dann nicht auch möglich, dass es bald keine Reichen oder Armen mehr gab? Aber noch schien eine solche Zeit in weite Ferne zu liegen. 1917 herrschten in Warschau Hunger und Typhus. Die Deutschen verschleppten Leute von offener Straße weg zur Zwangsarbeit. Wir waren am Verhungern. So wurde beschlossen, dass Mutter und wir jüngeren Kinder, Moische und ich, zu den Großeltern nach Bilgorei fahren sollten, wo die Lebensmittel nicht ganz so knapp waren. Damals war ich 13 und schon ein Bar Mitzwa. Eine Antwort auf meine Fragen aber hatte ich noch nicht gefunden. Liest du wieder, Giuliana?
Haben wir genügend Zeit?
Wollt ihr noch was hören? Okay.
Okay, Moment. Ich muss die kurze Geschichte finden. So. Diese Geschichte heißt Becoming a Tramp. Bill rolled his sleeves down. His long stick-like arms were covered in thick green veins. He beat the flecks of flour off his old jacket until it became dark again. For the past 8 years, he had tried to change jobs many times and not out of choice. If it had been up to him, he would have liked to stay in his current position for the last few years he had left. But of course, nobody ever asked him what he wanted. It was always just the same. Just as he was getting used to a place, to the job, and the people, there would be a hitch, and he would be asked to leave. This time he was working in a bakery. They were good people. He earned his 2 pounds and 10 shillings a week. They always paid him on time, and he was never bullied. The baker's wife, a buxom Jewish woman with a wide parting in her thin gray hair and a round smiling face, treated him like a son. Every morning before he went home after a long night's work, she would put a paper bag full of bagels in his hand. So, Bill, today at least you'll have a nice Jewish breakfast, she would beam with pleasure, and all the warts in her flabby cheeks and chin would smile in unison. The baker himself was a short Jew with a flowery beard who never stopped threatening his workers that he would send them all home, all of them, saying that he didn't need any union schmunion people in his bakery. In spite of that, most of them had worked for him for at least 10 or 15 years, so it was a real shame that he had to give Bill the sack. One day, one of the workers, a tall boy with broad shoulders, who had started work at the age of 14 when he left school, and who was already a father, imitated the baker. I don't need any union schmunion people. This is a bakery, not a union, he said with an angry voice, while trying to appear shorter than he was. Everybody had been in stitches, and Bill felt at home. Today, the boys each slipped a shilling into his hand and looked at him sadly. What do you think you're going to do, Bill? One of them asked. Bill turned around in surprise. Ever since he had started working there, nobody had called him by his name except for the baker's wife. When he had arrived in the bakery 6 months earlier, the boys had taken one look at him and decided to call him a schlemiel. He was such a wretched, simple creature. The skin on Bill's finely etched cheekbones was dark and thin. The lines on his low forehead appeared to have been drawn by a knife dipped in black ink. Dirt filled the nails on his long, bony fingernails. His eyes were bloodshot and watery. Then there were Bill's clothes. The jacket he wore each and every day was shapeless and threadbare. It had got so thin in places you could see his bones. The jacket made his elongated body look even skinnier. He looked like a dead tramp that still had a smile on his face. It was a brooding smile. The baker paid Bill an extra week's wages and said apologetically to his wife, "What can I do when the customers stay away? They are disgusted by him." His wife wrapped up a small piece of bread in the meantime and added a few biscuits that had gone soft. "Here, Bill, for the children." Bill had left the shop quickly. It was full of light and sunshine. Everything in it exuded an air of plenty. The baker's wife followed him with her eyes and shook her head. If only he would have kept himself a bit cleaner. "Don't talk nonsense," the baker said as he arranged the cakes on the tray. He then told his wife why Bill did not keep himself a bit cleaner. "You know, he's got tuberculosis, and his wife won't let him into the house. He doesn't even have a place to shave. Did you see his chin? It's so sharp and bristly, just like a black pig. He insisted on fighting in the war, our hero. Well, he's paid a heavy price. And who's going to help him? Poor sod. Who's going to employ a man whose lungs have been shot to pieces? They won't, for sure. He can still get a job with one of us in a few weeks. But with them? It is a fact Bill offered to mow the lawn of the lady with the big garden, and she just slammed the door in his face. She wouldn't even talk to him. Apparently, she said to her servant, the one with the blue dress who wears a stiff white cap on her gray head, that his mouth was as empty as a grave, and she was disgusted he was so dirty. The baker's wife, who had been tut-tutting as her husband spoke, rejoined, "That's how they are. They don't know anything about compassion. For them, if you have money, you're lucky. If you don't, you can start digging your own grave." It was Mrs. Levy, that lady's neighbor, who convinced me at the time to give him a job at the bakery. She said she knew him. "He's an honest fellow and he deserves a chance," she told me. "That's why I took him in. But I can't lose customers because of him, can I?" Bill did not have any desire to go home. He knew the look his wife would give him. It would make him feel hot and cold at the same time. He would start coughing up blood, and then there would be nothing else to do but slink away again. So he walked to a nearby park. It was a sunny day. The array of well-kept flower beds made for a dazzling, colorful display, and there was a lovely fresh smell in the air. Children were screaming and laughing as they rolled on the grass. Dogs frolicked around and barked loudly with pleasure. Couples were lying in each other's arms, forgetting that they might be needed at work. Loving each other in the grass meant that they would not get any money at the end of the week. "There's no work," they said to each other, "but there is sunshine. And when do we get any sun here?" They decided to live for the moment. On a separate piece of freshly cut grass, a group of about 10 elderly men were bowling. They stood there, slightly bent, with serious faces, their gray eyes transfixed. They followed the black balls with an intense curiosity as they rolled smoothly over the grass. Their wives were sitting on 2 wooden benches nearby, shriveled old women in dark clothes with pious faces and big hats on their gray heads. They looked at the game. Some of them were knitting waistcoats. The Jewish women were sitting a bit farther on. They were having a chat about cooking and baking and Jewish troubles. They were also amused to see how seriously the old people took their game. That's a clever game they're playing there, isn't it? They said, shaking their heads in a mocking fashion. Absolutely. Just imagine a Jew going bowling. Bill sat there a couple of hours watching the black balls on the green grass. From time to time, he really got involved in the play, wondering whether the ball would hit the target or not. Finally, he went home. His 4 boys were sitting in the kitchen on a clean rug which was torn in places. They were busy building a palace. They even had a pennant stuck between the wooden blocks. All 4 of them had the same granite gray eyes, and they looked well fed with healthy red cheeks. When they saw their father, they were very pleased, not so much because of him, but because now they had a chance to show him what a fine palace they had built. You see, Daddy, the middle one said ecstatically, that's what Mr. Brown has taught for us. He said that he will He says that he will buy us a real palace if we don't cry when Mummy goes away. Bill smiled sourly. So he's a good man, is he, that Mr. Brown? He asked the eldest, who was 8 years old. With a cheerful yes on the tip of his tongue, the little one suddenly saw how his father was looking at him. The words stuck in his throat and he stopped talking. Without understanding why, he frantically started to pile up the blocks higher and higher. Then, with a sudden gesture, he destroyed the whole edifice. The wooden blocks shot out in all directions, and the word yes lingered on the air. Where is your mother? Bill asked the children angrily. They did not answer. Where is your mother? He coughed. Mummy has said that I shouldn't say that I don't know, the 4-year-old said. The oldest boy giggled. He shut up suddenly and started collecting the wooden blocks from the floor. Mummy has gone away with Mr. Brown. He said that if she didn't go with him, she would have to pay the rent again, the oldest boy said softly, as if he was telling his father a secret. You won't tell her that I've told you, will you? The little one asked, wanting reassurance. Not tell her, Bill muttered under his breath. Not Mr. Brown either, the 6-year-old called out abruptly. He was a plump boy with blonde hair and a snotty nose, his little hands full of the blocks he was picking up from the floor. Otherwise, he will not buy the palace, he said, explaining the logic to Bill. Bill left. He went back to the park. He took a seat on the bench next to a lake. A blue-winged duck was swimming in the water, followed by a dozen yellow ducklings. Bill threw the soggy biscuits in the water. The duck swam straight at them, together with all her ducklings. He watched how greedily they nibbled away at the biscuits. A shabby old man with an overgrown gray beard, long tousled hair, and a pair of worn-out shoes, which revealed all 10 naked, swollen toes on his cracked feet, sat himself down with a heavy sigh. Hello, Bill. Are we having another holiday? Bill looked straight through the old man, his thoughts very far away. She was once a really decent woman, I can tell you, he said to himself, while he stared fixedly ahead. What do you mean? The old man looked at Bill with sickly, bulging eyes. He thought Bill had been talking to him. He has taken her away from me for the rent and the children's food. The old man had no clue what he was talking about. Night fell. It was not long before they heard the sound of a bell and the voice of the park keeper calling out, Everybody out! Bill, who was still holding a small piece of bread, left the park together with the old man to look for a place to spend the night. They settled down on the stone steps of a tobacco factory. They shared the bread for the baker's wife had given Bill and the old man's rags. Bill had become a tramp.
Ich möchte euch jetzt noch zum Abschluss etwas vorlesen aus dem Kapitel Rebitschele und Sprinzer. Wie kam ein frommer Jude am Schabbat, an dem es verboten ist zu kochen, zu einem heißen Tee? In kleinen Orten stellte man eine Schüssel mit heißem Wasser zusammen mit dem Schabbatmahl in den Backofen und in der Stadt hielt man in Teestuben Wasser in einem großen Kessel auf dem Herd heiß. Der Herd wurde freitags vor Sonnenuntergang angezündet, so blieb das Wasser den ganzen Schabbat über heiß. Junge Männer und junge Mädchen lächelten einander zu und unterhielten sich, während sie in den Teestuben ihren Tee tranken. Kinder kamen mit Teekesseln, um heißes Wasser auf Kredit zu kaufen, da es verboten ist, am Schabbat Geld bei sich zu tragen. Am Schabbat schickte mich mein Vater nach dem Mittagsmahl immer zum Heißwasserkaufen in Itscheles Lebensmittelgeschäft. Itscheles Laden war Laden, Wohnung und Teestube in einem und lag in der Krochmalna Nummer 15. Seine Frau Sprinzer, eine große, ruhelose und unordentliche Frau, die sich ständig über irgendetwas aufregte, war bekannt für ihr gutes Herz. Sie musste hart arbeiten, um ihre große Familie ernähren zu können. Einer ihrer Söhne, Noah, hatte mit mir zusammen den Cheder besucht. Sprinzer machte alles. Sie ging schwanger, brachte Kinder zur Welt, arbeitete im Laden, füllte das Lager auf, legte saure Gurken ein, machte Sauerkraut, kümmerte sich um den Schabbatkessel und fand sogar noch Zeit, Gutes zu tun. Sie war dauernd im Betrieb. Während sie eine Kundin im Auge behielt, die mit der Hand in der Salzlake herumpanschte und versuchte, einen Hering vom Boden des Fasses herauszufischen, passte sie gleichzeitig auf die Jungen auf, die nur zu gern mit den in Säcken aufbewahrten Bohnen spielten. Ständig musste Sprinzer besonders wählerische Kunden zurechtweisen, die so taten, als ob die Waren in dem Laden ihnen gehörten. Sie hatte eine zerrissene, fleckige Schürze umgebunden und schlurfte in abgetragenen Schuhen herum. Ihre Hände waren groß und kräftig wie Männerhände. Ihre Matronenperücke immer zersaust. Ein Fremder, der in einen Laden mit einer solchen Inhaberin kam, hätte sie sicher für eine primitive Person gehalten. Aber Sprinzer war gebildet und tugendhaft. Sie stellte ihr Leben in den Dienst der höchsten aller Aufgaben, für ihre Familie zu sorgen und, soweit die Umstände das gestatteten, sich jüdischem Brauchtum und dem Studium der Torah zu widmen. Ihr Mann, Reb Itschele, war angeblich Kaufmann, aber er verbrachte seine Tage mit Beten und damit an bestimmten Tagen das Mahl für die Chassidim auszurichten, mit Diskussionen über Heilige und dem Studium der Mishnah. Er war ebenso klein, wie seine Frau groß war. Er kümmerte sich um chassidische Dinge, wie sie sich um den Laden kümmerte. Itschele war ein Mann, der möglichst viel zur gleichen Zeit tun wollte. Er zitierte aus dem Sohar, lauschte den Geschichten des Eunuchen Reb Meir und dachte über die Interpretation eines schwierigen Verses nach, während er für irgendeinen Armen ein paar Gulden sammelte. Sprinzer kam nie los von ihren Fässern mit sauren Gurken, ihren Säcken mit Vorräten, ihren Holzbündeln und ihren Kunden. Reb Itschele, als junger Mann rothaarig, hatte schon einen gelbbraunen Bart, als ich ihn kennenlernte. Er bewegte sich mit kurzen, raschen Schritten. Wenn er im Lehrhaus betete, verschluckte er viele Wörter, andere wiederholte er immer wieder, während er auf und abschritt, in die Hände klatschte und die Fransen seines Gebetsmantels rasch in die Stirn hob. Seinem scharfen Ohr entging es nie, wenn er an der Reihe war, Amen zu sagen. In Gottes Haus hatte er, wie zu Hause, alles im Auge, um nie zu versäumen, an irgendwelchen frommen Handlungen teilzunehmen. Während der Woche waren diese beiden Menschen so beschäftigt, dass es unmöglich war, mit ihm oder ihr zu sprechen. Wenn ich aber am Schabbat mit meinem Teekessel zu ihnen kam, sah alles ganz anders aus. Die Familie lebte in einer kleinen Wohnung hinter dem Laden. Wenn ich mich recht erinnere, hatten sie nur ein einziges Zimmer, in dem auch der Herd mit dem Kessel drauf stand. Dennoch herrschte hier eine wirkliche Schabbatruhe. Sie lag über dem mit einem Tischtuch bedeckten Tisch, dem Kidduschbecher und dem Brotmesser mit Perlmuttgriff. Sprinzer trug eine ordentlich gekämmte Perücke und ein Schabbatkleid, das mit Ornamenten bestickt war. Reb Itschele hatte einen Satinmantel und trug einen mit Pelz verbrämten Hut. Die beiden hatten 2 Töchter, fromme Mädchen, fast gleichaltrig. Als ich noch ein sehr kleiner Junge war, stellten die Mädchen mir jeden Schabbat dieselbe Frage. Wen von uns würdest du lieber zur Braut haben? Verlegen zeigte ich dann immer auf die kleinere von den beiden. Warum sie? Fragte die größere dann. Und ich erwiderte, du bist zu groß. Meine Antwort rief jedes Mal Gelächter hervor. Aber je älter ich wurde, desto seltener wurde mir die Frage gestellt, bis man mich schließlich zu alt dafür hielt. Trotzdem vergaßen die Mädchen und ich nie unser kleines Spiel und wenn wir uns begegneten, sahen wir uns verlegen und gleichzeitig verschmitzt an.
Danke, das war schön.
Danke.
Danke.